There are different capital budgeting methods. In this video, I will show you 3 of them: payback, NPV, and IRR. NPV stands for net present value. IRR stands for internal rate of return. So let's start with payback period method. Assume that we have 2 projects, project A and project B. These are the cash flows of these 2 projects. And year 0 means today, at the end of year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4. For example, project A, you start with $100 investment. This is cash outflow, so it's negative. And then your cash inflow at the end after 1 year will be $40. Then after 1 more year, $30, $40, and $50. And for B, you start with $120 investment, initial investment. So it's cash outflow because you invest. And then at the end of year 1, you will have a cash flow of $30. At the end of year 2, you will have $50, then $30, then $85. We assume that interest rate or your required rate of return is 10% and payoff period is 3 years. So now let's start with payback period method. So this method is very easy, very simple, and we just want to know how long it takes to cover the initial cost when we will reach to the break-even point. So we invest $100, how many years, how long it takes we make $100 to cover the initial cost. And this is payback period method. So it's very simple. So let's start with project A. So for project A, let me write it down here. So we are now working on using payback period method. For project A, at the end of year 1, we will make $40. And it's not enough to cover $100 initial investment, right? So we need to continue. We need to go for 1 more year. At the end of year 2, we will make $30. This means at the end of year 2, so far, we have made in total 40 plus 30, 70 US dollar. And it's not still enough to cover the $100. So we need to proceed. We need to continue for 1 more year. Then at the end of year 3, you can make $40 and the total is 110. So in year 3, we already have covered, we have made $100. So it will take 1 to 2 years and a few months to cover $100 to reach the break-even point, right? So it's 1 year, $40 plus $30 in year 2. Then in year 3, how much do we need to make? We already have $70 and we need just $30 more from year 3 to reach to $100. We already have $70, we just need 30 more and then we will reach to 100. So in year 3, we don't need the whole 40. We don't need to work for the whole year to reach to the break-even point. We just need to make $30 out of the 40. And this means 2.75 years. So the the payback period for the first project is 2.75 years. Now let's do the same calculation for project B. For project B, the initial investment is $120. Can we cover it? Can we reach to 120 in the first year? No. At the end of year 1, we just have made 30 US dollar. Then we will continue. At the end of year 2, so far in total, we have made 30 plus 50, 80 US dollar. It's not still enough. We will continue to year 3. 30, 50, 30 means $110. Still, we haven't reached to $120. In total, it's 110. We haven't reached to 120 yet. We will continue to year 4. And yes, in year 4, we will make $85, and we just need $10 more. 30, 50, 30 means 110. We need just $10 more to reach to 120. And so it's 1 plus 1 plus 1. Year 1, year 1 year, 1 year, 1 year. And then we just need $10 out of this $85 to reach to the break-even point. and it's 3.12 years. Now the question is, should we accept both projects or only one of them, or maybe none of these projects should be accepted? We need to refer to the payback period. So the payoff period. The payoff period is 3 years. So assume that this company uses a 3-year payoff period. This means that we accept any project that reaches to the break-even point in less than 3 years. So based on this assumption, we only accept project A, right? Not project B, because project B takes more than 3 years, right? So the answer is project A. For these type of questions, you may have, when you have more than one project, the projects can be independent or mutually exclusive. If the projects are independent, then you can have both of them if both meet the criteria. In this example, actually only one of them met the criteria. But now let's assume that payoff period here was 4 years. Means suppose we accept any project that it reached to the break-even point in less than 4 years. Then both projects meet the criteria. Both are less than 4. Now which one you choose? If these two projects are independent, we are allowed to choose both of them, because if both meet the criteria, so in this case, if payoff period is 4 years, both are less than the payoff period, we accept both. But if they are mutually exclusive, means you can choose only one. You cannot go for both of them, right? So for mutually exclusive, you have only one choice. Then, if both of them meet the criteria, in this example I just said let's assume you accept any project with a payoff period less than 4 years. Then both meet the criteria. Now which one to choose? If you have to choose one, if they are mutually exclusive, of course we choose the best one. The best one is A, because you reach to the break-even point faster. Then you choose A. So be careful. Sometimes the projects are independent, sometimes they are mutually exclusive. If they are independent, as long as the projects meet the criteria, you can choose them. You choose all that meet the criteria. But if they are mutually exclusive, you need to choose the best one that meet the criteria. Let's continue. So, okay, just let me remind you that for payback period, you do the calculation to reach to when you to compute when you will reach to the break-even point, and then the criteria is it must be less than the payoff period. And here we compare it with these 3 years, which was the payoff period. Let's continue with NPV method. For NPV, it's just net present value, and you already have seen it in the previous topic, how to compute the net present value of future cash flows. So here we have a stream of cash flows. We just discount them to the present time. We use NPV, or net present value, NPV method, or net present value. So NPV of net present value of the first project is minus 100. So the formula I'm using here is just a simple formula. Present value is future value divided by 1 plus R power n, right? So future value is these cash flows, and R is interest rate, n is how many periods you are discounting. You may use your financial calculator as well. If you want to know more about it, watch the videos on the cash flow mode of your financial calculator. So let me write the formula. So minus 100 plus the first cash flow divided by 1. Interest rate here is 10% plus 0.1, and power is 1 because you are discounting it for 1 period. Then plus 30, 1 plus 0.1 means 1.1, and power is 2. Then plus 40. Yep, 40. 1.1 power is 3. Then 50. 1.5 power is 4. And if you do the calculation, or you may use, as I said, you may use the cash flow mode of your Texas Instrument BA tool plus financial calculator. The answer you will get is 25.36 US dollar. So this is the net present value of project A. Then you compute project for so this is the, let's write PA, present value of project A, present value of project B will be minus 102 plus 30 over 1.1 power 1. Next cash flow is 50, 1.1 power 2, then next one is 30. 1.1 power 3. The last one is 85, 1.1 power 4. And if you do the calculation, it's 29.19 US dollar. Now, which project to choose? The criteria to accept a project using NPV method is NPV must be positive. So when NPV is positive, means this project adds value to the firm. This means that the return on the project is more than the required rate of return of the firm, of the company. So here both of the projects meet the criteria, right? Both of them are greater than 0. So both are greater than 0. So both are good projects. But now, which one to choose? If these two projects are independent, we choose both of them, because both meet the criteria. But if the assumption is these two projects are mutually exclusive, then you must choose the best one, because you have the chance to you can choose only one project. Now, which one is the best one? The one which has a higher NPV. So we choose project B if they are mutually exclusive, right? This is NPV method. And then you may use IRR, means internal rate of return. For internal rate of return method, my suggestion is using a financial calculator because it's a bit complicated without a calculator. You need to do some try and error. And the method is very similar to NPV method. The only difference is, actually we write the same formula, so we construct the NPV formula, but when you want to use IRR, you assume you don't have interest rate. Here, we assume the interest rate is 10%, so we put 0.1 in this formula, the R here. But when you want to construct IRR formula, you want to use IRR method, you write the same formula, but you assume you want to compute R, and you assume net present value is 0. So I write the same formula here, so minus 100 plus 40 over 1.11 power 1, then 30, 1.1 power 2 plus 40, 1.1 power 3 plus 50, 1.1 power 4. Then you put, oh my God, you see, I made a mistake. Here, as I said, you need to assume we want to compute interest rate. So it's a bit different, right? So we don't know interest rate. And then we assume it's equals 0. So now we want to compute these R, this interest rate, right? And when you do the calculation, you may use the financial calculator, and you get 20 point. So IRR is 20.72%. For the second project, you do the same. So this is for project A, then for project B. Again, you write the same, but you assume if you want to compute R based on the assumption that net present value is 0. Minus 120 plus 31 plus R power 1. Then 50, 1 plus R power 2. Then 30, 1 plus R power 3. And 85, 1 plus R power 4. Then equals 0. And if you do the calculation, for this one, you will get 19.27%. Now, which project to choose? For IRR method, we accept the projects that the IRR is greater than your required rate of return or your interest rate. So any project that is greater than that IRR is greater than 10% is good project, and both of them actually meet the criteria because both are greater than 10%. Now, which one to choose? If these two projects are independent projects, means we are allowed to choose all that meet the criteria, and both meet the criteria. So if the two projects A and B are independent, we choose both of them. But if they are mutually exclusive, so if the assumption in the question is they are mutually exclusive projects, then we have to choose the best one. And the best one is the one with higher IRR. So we choose A, right? We choose A. So now let's assume the projects are mutually exclusive. If they are mutually exclusive, we need to choose the best one. Then in this case, the best one is A. Here, the best one is B. And here, the best one is A. Now, okay. Now, what happens if the results of, usually actually the results of NPV and IRR, usually the results are the same, but there are some cases that the results are different. For example, when you have, when the initial investments are different, when the cash flow in year 0, they are different, or when you have, for example, a cash outflow later, then the results may be different for, the results of IRR may be different from NPV method, right? But in other cases, usually they are the same. And what happens when the results of, for example, payback is different from NPV, NPV is different from IRR, and so on? So the best method is NPV. The best method is NPV, right? Payback method is a very weak method, right? So when the results contradicts, you go for NPV, right? So based on NPV, I will go for project B, right? The results of IRR and NPV, usually they are the same, but in some cases like this one, for example, the first cash flow at year, the initial investment are different, or later you have some negative cash flows, the results may be different. So always the best method is NPV. However, because this method is a bit complicated compared with payback period method, many companies use payback period method for many of their projects, especially very large companies when they have so many small projects and they really don't care about about their NPV, and they don't want to spend time to compute the NPV. So they just quickly compute the break-even point and make the decision. So maybe every month they have to decide about 50, 100 very small projects. So they just use quickly payback method and make the decision. However, NPV method is the best one. Why is the best one? I already have explained this in the slides. There are some reasons. One is because payback method doesn't include the risk, and it doesn't include the time value of money concept. And also, payback period method sometimes make mistake by ignoring the future cash, the cash flows that happen in long term later in the future. Let me give you some examples. Suppose that we are talking about payback period to show you that what are the problems of payback period method. Although many companies use it for making decisions these days. Let's look at this company, this project A, and Okay. Let's use the payback period method to make the decision about these two projects, A and B. So project A, there is a $40 initial investment. And as you can see, after 1 year, you need 1 year to reach to the break-even point. So the payback period for project A is 1. So after 1 year, you will reach to the break-even point. But what about project B? For project B, it takes 30 plus 50 plus 30. It doesn't reach to 500, but in year 4, it will reach to 500. So it will be 3 point something years for project B. So which project will you choose, project A or project B? Based on the payback period method, you will choose project A. Because in 1 year, the break-even point or the payback period is just 1 year, right? But for project B, it takes 3 years and a few maybe days or months to reach to the break-even point. So you choose A. But now you see the problem, right? Do you see the problem? The problem is, if you go for A, you are missing $1 million in year 4. You are missing $1 million in year 4. Yep. Is one of the problems. But if you use NPV method, no problem. The answer will be definitely project B. Let me give you another example. Okay, let's compute the payback method for these two projects. You want to reach to $100 in both projects. So 10 plus 30 plus 40 plus 20, it's 100. So for project A, the payback period is 4 years. For project B, also the payback period is 4 years because 20 plus 40, 60, then 90, then 100. So for both of them, the payback period is 4 years. But which one is a better project? Payback period doesn't tell you, right? But actually, if you look at this stream of cash flows, I think you can answer these questions. Because or let me just make it more clearer here, just right. Here is 40. Then 30, then 20. Now let's compare. So both of them reach to 4 years. They need 4 years to reach the break-even point. But payback period doesn't see any difference between these two projects. But actually, the projects are different because in project B, you are receiving a bigger cash flows earlier, right? 40, 30, 20, 10. Here 10, 30, 40, 20. So which project is better? You already know the concept of time value of money. We prefer to receive the bigger cash flows earlier, right? Because the value of these $40 year will be less when it's discounted to the present time. So if you use the NPV method, it will be included. The concept of time value of money will be included, and definitely it will reach to the answer will be project B based on NPV, but based on payback period, as you can see, there is no difference between them. So this is another problem because it doesn't include the time value of money concept, or it doesn't include the concept of risk into the calculation. So payback method has some limitations. However, because it's very user-friendly, easy to use, many companies these days are using it for making decisions for their small projects. But an NPV is more complicated. And one of the challenges for NPV is you need to compute your interest rate, and this is really time consuming and not really easy. So some companies prefer to just go to payback period method. And what about NPV and IRR? For IRR, the advantage is you don't need to compute. Sometimes you don't need to know the interest rate, your required rate of return, right? Because at the end, you need to compare it with your required rate of return to make the decision. You remember here, IRR was 20%, and we said the criteria to accept a project is the IRR should be greater than your required rate of return or your interest rate, which is 10%, right? But we don't start the calculation using the interest rate, the 10% interest rate. So sometimes when you construct the formula, you compute, you do the calculation, then the IRR you compute is big enough, and you know, oh, this is definitely more than my required rate of return, or more than the interest rate we usually use in the company. So I accept the project. So without knowing your interest rate, that you need to do a lot of calculation for it to know them. Here I just said, assume interest rate is 10%, but in the real world, you don't know it, you need to compute. So sometimes the IRR that you get is big, very big. I mean, it's very high. And you know, oh, of course my interest rate cannot, for example, suppose IRR is 40%. You know the interest rate that you demand is not 40%, right? In Malaysia, in the economy of Malaysia. So you say, okay, no need to compute my interest rate to compare. I already know whatever interest I have, definitely it will be less than 40%. So you just accept the project. So the advantage for IRR is, you don't, sometimes when IRR is very big or very small, you don't need to know your exact interest rate, and you accept or reject the project. However, for NPV, you need to know your exact interest rate to insert it into the formula and compute NPV. But anyway, the best method is NPV, because for IRR also, as I said, there are some, sometimes you get different results, and it has its own limitations. And one more advantage for IRR is easy to communicate, it's easy to report the results. For example, you would say to someone who doesn't know really finance, you would say, hey, the interest rate on this project, the IRR interest rate is 20%. And everyone understands what we mean by interest rate is 20%, right? But for NPV, when you say NPV is 25, they may not understand what we mean by NPV, right? So it's easier to report the results or communicate with the other stakeholders by just reporting the interest rate on a project. So these are some of the advantages and disadvantages of these methods. So again, NPV is the best method, and usually the results of NPV and IRR should be the same. However, there are some cases that you can see in the notes that I uploaded. The results may be different, and sometimes IRR gets more than one result, more than one IRR. This is when you use the financial calculator, it just gives you the first one. So you get small IRR, but there may be more than IRR results, because there may be more than one route when you solve the equation. So this is these were the three commonly used methods for capital budgeting.